Hello folks, so today I want to do something a little special. I want to do something for fun today, something not so serious. For so many different topics, we have alignment charts online. Many people make tier lists of games, of chips, of sodas, of foods, everything imaginable. And I want to make an alignment chart of languages. Now, what is this list I've selected? It's not languages I've learned, so before you make that video saying how I am a fake scammer clown, chill. I'm not claiming to know these languages. These are just including languages I've learned, I've dabbled in, or I passingly know a fact or two about. Most of these languages I don't really know. Some of these languages I kind of know, and just a couple of these languages I'm really confident in. So with no authority whatsoever, I'm going to organize these languages in terms of a few different factors. Well, on the y-axis, it's something easy to understand. I have lawful and chaotic. So a lawful language is going to be one that follows its rules that it sets for itself, and the chaotic language is going to be one that loves to break its rules. Or if it has rules, it's probably like 10 different rules for a certain grammar point. Then on the x-axis, there's something that was kind of hard to explain. The best explanation I can think of was high inertia and low inertia. What do I mean by that? I'm talking about a language that beginners can progress in easily. Some low barrier to entry. So the low inertia language is going to be one where you have to learn many rules before you make your first sentence, and the high inertia language is going to be one where you can quickly make a sentence in a couple minutes. So with these parameters, let's organize these languages. So the first one is Catalan. I don't know Catalan at all, but it is kind of recognizable to me as someone who's learned Spanish and French. So for me, I'm assuming it's going to be in that similar range. From what I've seen, it has quite a few laws, just like any other Romance language. So it's going to be kind of mid in this axis. Now for high inertia and low inertia, I'm assuming just like other Romance languages, it's going to be kind of high inertia. You don't need to know that much to start, but to be honest, I don't know much, so this is going to be the safe zone for Romance languages. French, a language I'm kind of comfortable in. I could do some pretty advanced things in this. So I can know that French is a kind of chaotic language. It doesn't like to follow the rules it sets for itself. It loves to break its own rules, so it's kind of chaotic. It's not the most chaotic thing I've seen, but it's kind of chaotic, in my opinion. Now, to start making sentences in French, I think it's pretty simple. You don't need to know that much information. You need to know verb conjugation, you need to know noun genders, that's about it. So I would say you can zoom pretty fast, but not quite as fast as others because you do need to spend a lot of time learning how to read because it's a very special alphabet and what is silent, what is not. It's going to take a minute before you start really getting some progress in French, so I'm going to put it somewhere closer to the middle. German is something I'm getting more confident in these days. I would say it's a language that's full of laws, but a lot of laws that it likes to break. So I'm going to say it's kind of more chaotic than French. To start making the German sentence, I think it's going to be a little more difficult. To make a German sentence, you're probably going to need to know noun cases, and to make a more complex sentence, you're going to need to know how to use like zu. You're going to need to know about like Nebensatz and what's the opposite of Nebensatz? Hauptsatz? So I would say it takes a while to get some progress in German, so I'm going to put it somewhere over here. Japanese, a really fun one. Where does Japanese go? Japanese kind of does have quite a lot of rules, but it tends to follow them, I think, so I'm gonna put it on the higher lawful side, but I can't say it's completely lawful. As for high inertia, low inertia, how easy is it to start a sentence? I think it takes a while to start making sentences in Japanese, so I'm gonna say it's actually pretty low inertia, even past German, to be honest, because it's just you need to get a lot before your first sentence. Swedish, something I'm not so comfortable with, but I did dabble in it and I do want to improve it more. I think it's really chaotic from what I've seen. I can't say it's farther than French. It's not that chaotic. It's somewhere closer to the middle, I think. I feel like this is the right spot. Now, to start making sentences in Swedish, I think it's pretty easy. You don't need to know that many grammar points to start making sentences. There's not really any conjugations. It's really past tense for all noun cases. So I'm going to say you're going to be really zooming to make sentences, so I'm gonna put it on the really far spectrum of high inertia. English, which I'm representing by the American flag. I could have chose British flag, but you know what I mean, English. Now, English speakers love to say how hard their language is, how much you need to know, but really to start making sentences, I think there's not that much you need to know. You need to know word order, maybe some vague, a few conjugations, a few verb tenses that can become complicated, some nouns can be complicated, but it doesn't take that long to start making English sentences. So I'm gonna put it somewhere over here actually. But does it follow a lot of its rules? I think it's really far down the chaotic spectrum, to be honest. I can't say there's a lot of grammar rules that are universal in English. There's always an exception, as always. Esperanto. Okay, that is something I vaguely dabbled in with the Duolingo course in like 2016, 17 or something like that, so I don't really remember much. But I do remember it was strange that they had noun cases and they had agreement for plurals. I thought that makes it hard to start making sentences, so I would say it's actually kind of similar to German. No, it's less than German. It's less than German. As for following its own rules, I think that's what Esperanto does best. It follows its own rules. In fact, I remember from the time I was dabbling in Esperanto, something that I really liked about the language was that you can kind of predict, oh, does this word exist because of this word? And it does. It works. This grammar point does exist. So it's very lawful. I don't think it broke its rules that often. Thai. I don't know much about the Thai language. I do know a little bit about the writing system and kind of the complexity of writing. I'm pretty sure it's a pretty analytic language where you don't need that many conjugations, but to be honest, I don't really know anything about Thai. So honestly, I would say because of the tones and because of the writing, it takes a while to understand something. And as for if it's lawful or chaotic, I don't really know because I didn't really spend any time learning Thai. So let's put it in the middle because I don't know. Latin. Latin is something I spent 3 semesters of doing in university, and it was a really fun experience because I was like the best one in my class the first semester. I'm not trying to brag here, I'm just kind of telling a story. In the second semester, there was just a couple students. My third semester was funny because there was 2 students, me and another one, and then after like 2 days, that other student dropped, so it was literally just me and the teacher. So I have a good memory of Latin. I remember they generally follow their own laws. They don't really break their own rules, but there was some weird things with poetry where it decided to break its own rules. And it also depends on what era of Latin you're talking about. I learned classical Latin. I learned like the Latin from the time of Caesar, not really ecclesiastical Latin, like a later vulgar Latin. So it was pretty lawful in that time, I think. But then, of course, yeah, I could go on and on about how actually that was just the language of the elites, that regular people talked a little differently. Okay, but that is not my expertise. Now, how long does it take to start making sentences? I think it takes a fat minute because you need to learn a lot about word order, a lot about conjugations, a lot about noun cases. So I think it's one of the languages that take the most. So I would say it's somewhere over here, to be honest. Nederlands. I don't know much about the Dutch language except for some vague posts on Instagram, like a show. Like I never learned Dutch, but from what I've seen, it's very chaotic. From what I've heard from the grammar, it's very chaotic from what I heard, but it seems like something you can start making sentences pretty soon because there's not too many barriers to entry, but I wouldn't put it past French, so somewhere like here. Now, Serbia. I don't know the Serbian language. We speak Bulgarian at home, but I can kind of understand a lot that Serbian people say. The grammar is more complex than Bulgarian, which I'm very comfortable with. I would say it's pretty difficult to start making sentences just because it's Slavic language. I believe it still has the distinction between like, what is that grammar point called? Like a completed verb stem and an uncompleted verb stem, that mood. So it's pretty tough to get started, but I think it kind of breaks its own rules a lot from what I've heard. Just from the bits I heard, I'm not so familiar. If you like this video already, please give it a like and consider subscribing. If you want to see more from me, But now, back to the video. Spanish, something I'm a little bit more familiar with. I did try to learn this one, and I should go back to learning more. I've talked about it before in another video. I think you don't need to know that much to start making sentences in Spanish. You can start making sentences pretty quick in Spanish, but I do think it generally tends to follow its own rules. From what I've seen, I don't see people breaking grammar rules that much. Bulgarian, this is something I'm very familiar with. We speak this at home. It's my heritage language. I would say it's a language that needs a lot of, you need to learn a lot of suffixes, a lot of verb conjugations before you start speaking. So I think it's somewhere over here, but does it follow its own rules? I would say generally yes, it does follow its own rules. So I would put it somewhere over here. You know, not to a T, but generally follows its rules. Chinese, specifically Mandarin, the one I learned at university. It is something that you can really start making sentences really quickly. It's probably one of the highest inertia languages I can think of. And I think it's tends to follow its own rules. You learn a rule, there's not too many exceptions, I think. So I would put it somewhere in the corner, not the very edge, but pretty far. Greek, I have never learned Greek, but just from Wikipedia articles, vague social media posts, I kind of am knowing what Greek is trying to do, and I think it's pretty chaotic from what I've seen, and it takes a while to start learning things. So you seem to have noun cases, you seem to have gender, conjugations, so I would say it's somewhere over there. Plus, there's the fact that you have to learn a script that only works for Greek and nothing else. So maybe I'll scoot it just a little bit more. Italian. I did 2 hours of Italian for that one video, for that clickbait title of learning Italian in 2 hours. So I did familiarize myself with Italian grammar a little bit. And I would say that, like other Romance languages, it really likes its rules. There's a lot of them for Italian, but at least it likes its rules. Now, to start making sentences, it's slightly over here, but like barely. I think you need to learn just quite a lot of rules before you make your first sentence, and for that reason, it's kind of closer to the middle. Russian. Russian is an interesting case because I think it takes a lot of time to make your first sentence. You need to know so many grammar rules before you start. To be honest, I think in the grand scheme of things, it's not too chaotic. So I would put it somewhere like right there, to be honest. It's not too chaotic, I think. Vietnamese, something I've absolutely never learned. Well, thanks to the script, I think that makes things slightly easier to start, so maybe it's barely over here, but the grammar seems to be kind of typical for a like Austronesian language. It's Austronesian, yeah? And to be honest, I don't know how lawful or chaotic it is, because I didn't learn it. I didn't learn it at all. I don't know anything about Vietnamese. But I would say it's giving very chaotic. So I'm just going by vibes. So I would say it's somewhere right here by vibes. Finnish. A lot of people in the language community online love to complain about Finnish. So I have been warned. I heard there's a lot to learn before you start making your first sentence. So it's somewhere over here. But does it follow its own rules? I heard that it doesn't. So I think it's somewhere over here, but I never learned Finnish. This is just me vaguely seeing things online. That's where I think it is. Arabic. So where would I put Arabic? For me, I have a friend who really likes Arabic, and he tells me all the time about how, oh, it just fits together. It makes so much sense. So I think just by his excitement, I would say it's kind of more lawful. It seems to like its rules, but I think it's really hard to get into it because there's a unique script, because you need to choose a dialect, so you need modern standard Arabic and then a local variety. So I feel like it's somewhere over here for like the starting time before you start making progress. I think it's a while. Korean is something I'm comfortable with. I think, all things considered, despite having a unique script, despite not being related to any language, it seems to follow its own laws, and you can make sentences kind of early, but it's still pretty difficult to start making sentences, I think. I think there's a lot of high-level grammar that complicates things so much, but I mean, for the early steps, I think it's not that bad, to be honest. I think some people are going to disagree with me, and that's all right, but this is my alignment chart. Portuguese is something I have never learned, but as a Romance language, I kind of do recognize when I see Portuguese writing, I kind of understand what they're talking about. And that same friend that loves Arabic, loves Portuguese, dated a Brazilian person, so always talks to me about Portuguese. The fact that grammar differs between Europe and Brazil kind of makes me think it's pretty chaotic. So everybody's just making up their own grammar rules. But I think as a Romance language, there's not that much to learn before you start making sentences. So it's somewhere over here, I think. Turkish. Turkish is something I'm not very good at, but I did learn myself. Like, I do have experience with Turkish. I think there's quite a lot of rules before you start making sentences. There's so many noun cases, but then at the same time, there's not... Oh, I'm kind of like conflicted. I think it's kind of low inertia, I think. Because... No, I'm really conflicted. I would say, maybe this feels about right. But as for lawful and chaotic, I think it's very, very lawful from what I've seen. When I learn a new grammar point, it usually is pretty consistent, or if there's an exception, there's like one or two. And on top of that, with all of these noun endings, verb endings, they seem to be pretty consistent phonetically. I would say maybe even higher, somewhere like that. So this is my language alignment chart. This is what I think about various languages. Some I've learned, some I have not, some I'm very familiar with, some I'm barely familiar with. This isn't really about difficulty. You can't really order things because it's kind of complex. Does it follow its own rules? Does it not follow its own rules? Do you have a lot to learn in the beginning and there's a lot later? It's really complicated. So this is basically the answer for me. What is the hardest language? Well, it depends on what axis you're looking at. Thank you for watching today. Please give it a like if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you want to see more from me. I have my social medias linked below, which you can follow if you want to see more of me. If you want to do this alignment chart for yourself, I'll have it linked in the description so you can do it in your own time. At me on social media if you do it yourself, because I'm really curious what other people think of this selection. I also have a website at studywithalex.com where I talk about language related things which could be interesting to you if you enjoyed this video today. So that is going to be all for today's video. I'll see you for another video very soon, alright? 다음에 봐요.